Hello, I'm going to just do a quick review for you before your test on research methods. So let's take a look at some slides I put together last year to help students. This is a challenging test because it's so big. For standard one, it's pretty simple. You want to make sure you know the difference between hindsight bias and overconfidence. Hindsight bias is when we think we've always known it. So we see the result and they're like, I knew that. That's hindsight bias. Overconfidence is just when we think we know more or we're smarter than we actually are. So those are pretty easy. The reason that we do research is so that we can overcome the hindsight bias and the overconfidence. We've got 5 methods of research. 3 of them are descriptive. Surveys, that's where you ask questions. It's really easy to do. It's cheap, but you have to worry about people lying and they hate to fill out surveys. So those are some challenges. A case study is where you study a person or a group in depth. So you're going to do a lot of different tests, some interviews, things like that. You'll collect a lot of data, usually on somebody that has some kind of interesting characteristic. So maybe they have an interesting disease or something like that, right? Problem with case study is it can't be generalized to everyone. You get good data on the people or person that you're studying, but it can't be generalized to everyone. Then you've got naturalistic observation, and that's when you observe people in a natural setting. It doesn't mean in nature. A lot of people mistake that. It can mean in nature if you watch gorillas in the wild, but it could also be children in a playground. That's a natural setting, okay? And so anything that's not like a lab setting. You get information. I'm trying to think what would be the hold back on naturalistic observation. I don't think you have to worry about the pros and cons of it so much. All right. Then we have a predictive method. That's the correlational study. That's just when we're comparing 2 variables. Okay. And so we want to use this when you can't, it'd be unethical to do the experiment. Also, you can use it as the beginning of your research project to see if there is any kind of correlation so that you can save a little money on the experiment end if there isn't. Just always remember, I can't say it enough, correlation does not prove causation. So when you're comparing 2 variables and you're not manipulating anything, it's never going to give you causation. The only way to establish causation is through an experiment, and that's by manipulating variables. That is when you can establish a cause and effect relationship. Remember, it could say causation, cause and effect, causal relationship, causal connection. Anything causal can only be done through an experiment, okay? Then we've got a couple of studies. I think we talked about these on an earlier lesson, but I'm going to throw these in here anyway. A longitudinal study is where you follow the same group for a really long time. And you do different data collections along the way. A cross-sectional study is where you collect across like race, gender, age, etc. So you're cutting across all those, and you collect data from all kinds of different people at one point in time. So that's longitudinal versus cross-sectional. All right, experimental design. This is a big one. This typically not a huge amount of multiple choice questions. Of course, there will be on our test, but this is, prime material for an FRQ, okay? So a theory is just the big picture. Your hypothesis is creating that testable prediction. So we're taking our theory and we're doing something that we can actually test. Operational definitions, okay? An operational definition, it has to happen and it has to be good or you can't replicate the study, right? So you have to be very specific about how you're measuring, what you're measuring. It's going to relate most typically to the dependent variable. Of course, you can have to operationally define what you're doing with the independent variable, but for psych purposes, most of the time the testing is asking you to operationally define the dependent variable. How are we going to measure it? What are we measuring and how do we measure it? Replication is needed to establish validity. You can't replicate a study if you don't have a solid operational definition. So those 2 things, operational definition and replication, go hand in hand, okay? You've got variables. We've talked about independent variable is the one that you manipulate. The dependent variable is the one that you're going to measure. Don't forget dry mix. The dependent variables on the y-axis and the independent variable is on the x-axis. Make sure you know that. Confounding variable is one that could cause a change in the dependent variable besides the independent variable. So it's not the independent variable, but it causes a change. You got to make sure you account for them and control for them. And one way to do that is to use random assignment. Random assignment helps you control for those confounding variables. All right, your experimental group is the group that is going to have the independent variable applied to them. Your control group is the group that doesn't get the independent variable. There's no manipulation. If it's a drug study, they get the placebo. All right, you're going to use random assignment to assign to both groups. So I have my random sample from my population, and now I've got to assign them to the experimental group and the control group. If I use random assignment to if it's random when I assign them, then that will control for the confounding variables. Know what a placebo is? Okay, that's just a fake. The placebo effect is when the placebo gives results. So people get better because of their expectations, even when they're taking the fake drug. How do we control for placebo effect? You're going to use a double blind, or you're going to use a single blind study. So that way, to control for placebo effect, it's a single blind. That makes sure the participants don't know what group they're in. Now, we can also control for experimental bias and placebo effect using a double blind study. Remember the double blind study, there's 2 layers of blindness. The first layer are the participants, they don't know which group they're in, and the second layer is the researcher. The researcher also doesn't know what group each person is in, whether they're in the control or the experimental. Random sample, you got to know the difference between random sample and random assignment. Random sample is you randomly choose people from the population so that everybody has the equal opportunity of being included in the sample. And then random assignment, you take the members of that sample and you randomly assign them to the control and experimental groups so that everybody has the same chance of getting in that experimental group. Okay, and also remember, can't say it enough, it helps you control for confounding variables. Correlations, all right, I like correlations, that's probably my favorite. Correlational studies are just trying to find out if there's a relationship between 2 variables. There's no manipulation of the variables, that's an experiment. Correlation, again, does not apply causation. It can't prove cause and effect. A positive correlation means the independent and dependent variables move in the same direction. They can move up or they can move down. Remember, use your hands and just as you read the variables, what's happening? One's going up, one's going down. Are they both going up? Are they both going down? If they're going up or going down together, then that is going to be a positive correlation. So as you increase your exercise, your fitness level increases. Both are moving up. That is going to be a positive correlation. Or the less you exercise, the more your fitness level decreases. So they're both moving down. Both of those are positive correlations. It doesn't matter that it's going in a different direction, going down. It is still positive as long as they move together. Positive doesn't mean good or bad, okay? It just means they're moving together. Negative correlations are when the dependent and independent variables move in opposite directions. So as temperature decreases, the amount of clothing people wear increases. The more somebody practices golf, the lower their score. They're moving in the opposite directions. Okay, don't forget you can get illusory correlations. It's where you think there's a correlation, but not one doesn't really exist. So like tall kids getting better grades in psych. Okay, so don't forget that illusory correlation. That's just where it looks like maybe there's one, but there really isn't anything. Okay, and then correlation coefficient is how you numerically express how strong the correlation is, right? The closer it is to 1 or -1, the stronger the correlation. The 1's going to be a positive correlation. The negative number is going to indicate a negative correlation. Remember, coefficient will never be over 1 or under -1. Okay, if you see a -1.25, that's a fake. Don't fall for it. Okay, the closer the correlation is to 0, the weaker the correlation is. Okay, So if it's a big bunch of dots, that's going to be a very low correlation. Remember, the R is the correlation coefficient, so it usually says R equals something. A negative number just means a negative correlation. It doesn't mean it's weaker. It's the same strength as a positive correlation of that number. You've got to know that a positive or a correlation coefficient of 1 or -1 is going to give you a straight line of dots, okay? 0, there's going to be no line. There's no indicators of line. As you get, you move up to like the 0.4, you can kind of start to see an upward tendency, downward tendency on the -0.4, and you can see much more of a line at -0.7, okay? Look as on the negative, the line heads downward, okay? On the positive correlations, the line moves upward, right? Be able to look at dots and give an idea, is it positive or negative? So which way is the line trending or the dots trending? And the more in line the dots are, the higher the correlation. So they'll often give you a set of pictures and ask you to pick the best correlation or the worst correlation, something like that. All right, standard 4, this is the one that gives people fits. Remember, descriptive statistics are measures of central tendency and measures of variability. You've got to know what the mean is. That's the average. Add up the numbers and divide by the number of numbers. Okay, this is the mean is the measure of central tendency that's most affected by outliers, by extreme scores. All right, so when data is skewed, this is not a good measure of central tendency. All right, mode is just the number which occurs more frequently. So to calculate the mode, just line up your numbers and group them and see which one there's more of. And the median, you put the numbers all in numerical order and find out which one is the middle. So if you have 7 numbers, the fourth number is going to be the middle, and that's going to be your median. This is the best measure of central tendency when you have a skew. So when there are outliers or the data is skewed, you've got to use the median. Remember that, that's definitely on the test. Then you've got your measures of variability, and that just describes the variation in the data. What's the spread of the data? Range is one of them. You find the largest number and the smallest number, and you subtract it, the smallest number from the largest number, and that's going to tell you the range. That just tells you the spread of the data. And then you've got standard deviation, which is the most common measure of variability, and it's just showing you how far the number deviates from the mean. Remember, the mean is the average. Okay, then you got this normal distribution. I'm going to run out of time. The normal distribution, remember the mean, median, and mode are all the same in a normal distribution. All you have to know for standard deviation is, how to calculate it. So if they give you a standard deviation and the mean, one standard deviation, you just add 1 standard deviation. 2 standard deviations, you add 2 of the standard deviations to the mean, and 3 the same way. If it's going in the negative direction, you're just going to subtract them. Okay, don't forget the 68, 95, 99.7% rules. Okay, 68% of all scores fall within 1 standard deviation, the mean, 95 fall within 2, and 99.7 fall within 3 standard deviations. Those rules we're talking about, 3 standard deviations above and below the mean. Don't forget, you have to know that with IQ, that's the only mean and standard deviation you have to know. The mean is 100 and the standard deviation is 15. Okay, so don't forget that. You've got your negative skew. Remember, the tail points in a negative direction. That means there's too many high scores. That test was too easy. Okay, always in a skew, median is the best measure of central tendency. When you have a positive skew on the right, that means that the tail's pointing in the positive direction. It means there's too many low scores. The test was too hard. And so your median still in any kind of skew is the best measures of central tendency. Don't forget statistical significance. If your p-value is less than or equal to 0.05%, 0.05, which is 5%, then your results are statistically significant. So they can be generalized back to the population. If your p-value is greater than 0.05 or greater than 5%, then your results are not statistically significant and you cannot generalize with them.